Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our webinar from the Coalition of Healthcare Communication. Title of this webinar is Navigating the, quote, clear, conspicuous, and neutral direct-to-consumer prescription drug advertising final rule for agencies. That's a mouthful. But we wanted to bring this recent information about a Food and Drug Administration rule that's going into effect in about a month on May 20th and an enforcement date of November 20th. Just some background, I wanted to also let you know that we have some upcoming events on April 24th as part of our Navigating the Health Data Privacy Landscape. We're having a webinar that's putting HIPAA compliance into practice. And also on May 15th in Washington, D.C., the 4As and ANA are having a Capitol Hill Day. This is a free event to come to. There will be some briefing sessions and you will be included in Hill visits to visit with your U.S. representatives and senators. Also, I'll just mention that FDA cannot typically go into hypotheticals. So when we come up to Q&A, we'll try to give some things, but if they can't answer, then we'll try to get you an answer later, but may not be able to answer all your specific questions. What we'll be doing is we'll take a Q&A section at the end of the program. And if you have any questions that come along, please put them in the Q&A box and I will take those and we will be giving those to Susanna to answer. Please note that this recording is also this webinar is also being recorded. And so it will be posted up in the next couple of days. And we'll have some additional resources there that Susanna will talk about this. Also, I just want to kind of close and say, again, thank you for joining the Coalition of Healthcare Communication webinar event. I'd like to introduce to you today Susanna Boyle, who is Regulatory Counsel in the Office of Medical Practice of the Office of Prescription Drug Promotion in the Center for Drug Evaluation Research at the Food and Drug Administration. If you'd like to read more about her, please go to the registration website. There's a little brief description about her background and a link to her LinkedIn account. Again, thanks for joining us. Now I'd like to turn over the program to Susanna. And thank you. We look forward very much to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, and thank you, Jim, for having me. As Jim mentioned, my name is Susanna Boyle, and I am a regulatory counsel at the Food and Drug Administration in the Office of Prescription Drug Promotion within the Office of Medical Policy. I'm also the technical lead for the recently issued final rule, direct-to-consumer prescription drug advertisements, presentation of the major statement in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner for advertisements in television and radio format. And as Jim aptly noted, that's quite a mouthful. So we generally refer to the rule as the Clear, Conspicuous, and Neutral Rule, or CCN, and I'll be referring to it as either of those two names from here on out. So today I'm going to discuss prescription drug promotion generally, and more specifically, how the Clear, Conspicuous, and Neutral Rule affects or doesn't affect prescription drug promotion. So this is a slide we have to show at the start of each presentation. And here we go. We have, as a roadmap here, our agenda. So I'm going to touch briefly on some background of OPDP, our regulatory authority, and prescription drug promotional communications. And then we'll go into the Clear, Conspicuous, and Neutral final rule with some background, as well as the effective and compliance dates. And then the CCN final rule standards that will be used to determine whether the major statement in certain ads is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. We'll discuss some assistance FDA has available, and then we should have time for some questions. So this is to begin by orienting where OPDP is, Office of Prescription Drug Promotion, OPDP, is within the organization. So this slide presents the different centers that are in FDA. OPDP is in the super office, Office of Medical Policy, and we are in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, what is generally called CDER. So OPDP's mission is to protect the public health by helping to ensure that prescription drug promotion is truthful, balanced, and accurately communicated. We have a diverse team. We're made up of pharmacist reviewers, social scientists, policy analysts, regulatory counsels, and program managers. And together we provide surveillance, compliance, research and education programs, and policy and guidance writing aimed at fostering better communication of labeling and promotional information to both healthcare providers and consumers. So the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or FD&C Act, was enacted in 1938. And the prescription drug promotion law there states that promotion cannot be false or misleading about a drug's safety or effectiveness, that a promotion must have fair balance between effectiveness and risk information, and that the promotion reveal material facts about the product being promoted, including consequences resulting from using the drug as promoted. Now, the FD&C Act also gives FDA the authority to create regulations to provide the details on how the law is to be followed. FDA regulations are located at Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR. Advertising regulations are generally found at 21 CFR 202.1, and labeling are located at 21 CFR 201.100, but there are some others scattered kind of throughout our title. One of those specifically is 21 CFR 314.81B3. Now, this regulation requires the submission of all promotional materials at the time of initial dissemination or publication, and that submission must include Form 2253 and the drug's current prescribing information. So what this means is if a firm intends to publish a web page promoting the drug or a TV ad promoting the drug, the promotional materials must be submitted to FDA at the time the website goes live or the TV ad begins airing. So a couple things to note. One is that I said at the time of initial dissemination, that's when it needs to be submitted. The other thing to really note here is that I said the submission of promotional materials, not approval. And we'll touch on that a little bit more. So first I want to kind of go through some common misconceptions about FDA that we've learned or hear often. The first is that FDA legalized direct-to-consumer broadcast advertising in the late 90s. And that's not true. First of all, there was nothing in the FD&C Act prohibiting DTC broadcast advertising to consumers. But in the 1990s, FDA issued guidance or developed guidance that talked about how DTC broadcast ads could satisfy the existing regulations, which allowed those ads to be excused from providing comprehensive risk disclosure, so long as they provided the major side effects and contraindications, what we now call the major statement, and then provided adequate provision for consumers to obtain the full prescribing information, or PI. A second misconception, and one that we actually addressed in the preamble to the final rule, is that FDA does not allow drugs with serious side effects to be advertised on TV and to consumers, and that's just not true. But you know, the CCN final rule doesn't change the major side effects and contraindications to include in the major statement, but by presenting the risk information in a manner that is clear, conspicuous, and neutral, It'll help consumers notice, attend to, and understand a drug's risks and serious side effects. So a common misconception we hear is that FDA has the authority to ban DTC advertising, and that's very simply not true. Such a ban would require congressional action that would need to meet constitutional standards. Another misconception is that FDA approves ads. We do not approve ads. While FDA regulates prescription drug advertising and promotion, this doesn't mean we approve it. While firms are required to submit their ads to FDA prior to disseminating the piece, as I noted in that previous slide, they are not required to obtain FDA's approval of the piece. And then finally, there is a misconception that FDA regulates good taste, and we just don't. Our focus is on the content of the promotional communication, particularly whether statements regarding the safety and efficacy of the drug are truthful and not misleading. So that leads to, what does OPDB actually regulate? So our activity generally focuses on promotional communications for human prescription drug communications, for human prescription drug products issued by or on behalf of the drug's manufacturer, packer, or distributor. This means that OPDP considers materials aimed at not just consumers, but healthcare providers, as well as payors. These are insurers, formulary committees, a mixture of these. So on the slide here, you'll see some examples of promotional communications. So notably, here's what we don't regulate. We don't regulate the promotion of over-the-counter drugs, compounded drugs, drugs for animals, dietary supplements, medical devices, certain biological products, foods, or cosmetics. The regulation of those promotions are either at other centers within FDA, such as the Center for Veterinary Medicine, or other agencies outside, such as the Federal Trade Commission. So when we think of prescription drug advertising or promotion, we generally think of product claim communications. They're the most common. Product claim communications generally include the name of the drug, information about its indication, and the drug's risks and benefits. Examples would include sales aids, journal ads, TV ads, slide decks, product websites, and mailing pieces that talk about a specific drug. So this is the category of promotion that is subject to the CCN final rule. However, there are a couple other categories of promotional communication that I want to touch on quickly. These are reminder promotional communications and help-seeking and institutional communications. Now, generally, these materials are not subject to the same requirements regarding disclosure of the product's effectiveness and safety that we see for product claim communications, but they're also very limited in the amount and type of information they contain. Reminder ads include the proprietary name and established names of the drug. We call those also the brand and generic names. They can also include the dosage form, package contents, price, name of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor. Importantly, they do not include the indication, dosage recommendations or uses, or other written, printed, or graphic representations or suggestions related to the drug product. So because reminder ads are not required to include risk information, it's important to note the reminder promotion is not permitted for drugs that have a boxed warning. Boxed warnings, are sometimes called black box warnings, appear on a prescription drug label and are designed to call attention to serious or life-threatening risks. If a drug carries a boxed warning, it's the most prominent warning in the labeling. So help-seeking and institutional promotional materials do not make any representations about a specific product. Help-seeking, or otherwise called disease awareness ads, discuss a particular disease or resources for patients with a particular disease. It also includes the name of the company. however, does not make reference to a specific drug or product. Institutional communications generally include a company name and areas of research, but don't make any specific drug. So as I mentioned in the last slide, the most common type of material that you'll see and are probably familiar with is a product claim promotional communication. We're going to focus on this category since it's the category subject to CCN. Product claim communications mention a specific drug product and make claims regarding its use. The regulations require that these types of materials not be false or misleading regarding the drug's side effects, contraindications, and effectiveness. The regulations also require that the communication reveal material facts regarding consequences of using the drug as promoted, and that the communication include a balanced presentation between the risk and benefit information. This is also called fair balance. And balance depends on both the content of the information and how the information is presented. Product claim communications must be accompanied by the PI, prescribing information, or a brief summary of the risks associated with using the drug as prescribed. However, as we've touched on, the regulations allow TV and radio ads to present the major side effects and contraindications of the advertised drug instead of the brief summary or PI, as long as the communications provide consumers ways to obtain the package labeling. And this is known as a major statement, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. So while our focus today is on the product claim ads, I want to show you different examples so you can see how these categories look in use. I'm going to show examples for print ads, but this information can be extrapolated to ads in TV or radio format. So for our discussion, we're using a fictitious product from a fictitious herb. The drug's name is Arbitrare, with a generic name of Mizbastadium. I did not create that because I would have made it easy to pronounce. And it comes in a 100 milligram tablet. Arbitrare is manufactured by Ace Pharmaceuticals, and it's indicated to treat seasonal allergy symptoms in adults. So let's see how this information could look in different promotional categories. All right, so this is an example of a product claim piece directed towards consumers or patients. So the fictitious ads in the next few slides can all be found on the FDA.gov site by searching for sample prescription drug advertisements. When you find these on our site, you can see information next to all of the numbers that can be helpful in creating ads. For our discussion today, though, I'm just going to point out some of the relevant numbers. So number one shows the drug's brand and generic names, Arbitrare and that awful generic name. Next to number two, you'll see the FDA approved indication on this drug, in this case, treatment of seasonal allergy symptoms. And then importantly, next to number four, you see there are two lines there. It shows a fair balance of the drug's risk and benefit information. We see that the drug can help reduce allergy symptoms for up to 24 hours, but the ad also notes that users may experience headaches, cold symptoms, et cetera, while using the drug. All right, so next is a reminder ad. And here's an example of our reminder piece for our fictional product. The reminder ad includes, next to number two, the brand and generic names. Importantly, the ad does not describe the indication or provide any dosage recommendation. So next we have help seeking or disease awareness. Next to number two, you'll see that the ad provides symptoms of the indication. So runny nose, sneezy, itchy, watery eyes, right? So the ad includes the name of the company. Well, it should include the name of the company at number four, but apparently somebody missed that. But importantly, nowhere does the ad make reference to a specific drug product. Now, if it did include a specific drug name and was disseminated by or on behalf of the drug's manufacturer, packer, or distributor, this would be considered a product claim piece, because the audience would now associate the drug with use in seasonal allergies. All right, so our site does not include a fictional representation of an institutional ad, so you're stuck with what I created. In our case, this would be an institutional ad, it would include the name of the company, in our situation here, Ace Pharmaceuticals, and then areas of research. So that could include seasonal allergies or even, any of the symptoms involved in seasonal allergies. As long as the ad was limited to this information, such an ad would not be subject to FDA regulations. It would probably be regulated by FTC. So how does this relate to CCN's webinar for which you showed up? Well, while the previous slides gave you an overview of promotional communications, it's also been providing you the boundaries for the communications that we'll be discussing for the rest of the presentation. The CCN final rule is focused on product claim advertisements presented directly to consumers in television or radio format for human prescription drugs. We'll touch on this a little bit more in later slides, but I wanted to point it out to you now since it's fresh in your mind. So now that we have a baseline of understanding, let's get into the law and implementing regulations. First, let's discuss what was in the regulation before CCN. The regulation, found at 21 CFR 202.1E, implemented the requirement of FDA Act Section 502N that all prescription drug advertising include a brief summary relating to the drug's side effects, contraindications, and effectiveness. Moreover, at 21 CFR 202.1E1, stated that all prescription drug advertisements for human and veterinary drugs that are broadcast through media such as TV, radio, or telephone communication systems shall include information relating to the drug's major side effects and contraindications in the audio or audio and visual parts of the presentation. In 2007, the Food and Drug Administration Amendments Act was enacted. We call this FDA, and it updated Section 502N of the FDA Act. So 502N now also requires that for advertisements for prescription drugs subject to Section 503B1, 503B1 means human prescription drugs, that are presented directly to consumers in television or radio format, and that state the name of the drug and its conditions of use. That's what makes it a product claim communication. The major statement relating to the side effects and contraindications is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. So while FDA made the change to Section 502N, it did not specify what the requirements for clear, conspicuous, and neutral should be. Instead, FDA directed FDA to establish those standards, and the CCN final rule is the result of that directive. So we finally reached the rule. The CCN rule issued on November 21st, 2023, and it amends our current regulation located at 21 CFR 202.1E1. The final regulation requires that for certain ads for human prescription drugs that are presented directly to consumers in TV or radio format, the major statement relating to side effects and contraindications is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. Unlike the statutory language, the final rule does not include the clause stating the name of the drug and its conditions of use. And that's because that information is already located in our regulations at Section 202.1E2 and is not affected by the CCN final rule. In a moment, I'll provide you the 5 standards that are part of the codified and will be used independently and collectively to determine whether a DTC TV radio ad complies with the final CCN rule. Then I'll provide you a more plain language version of the standards, but first I want to refresh your memory on the types of ads to which CCN applies. The CCN requirement is for ads for human prescription drugs that are presented directly to consumers or DTC in television or radio format, and that state the name of the drug and its conditions of use. Again, those are the product claim communications. What that means, though, is that print ads like those you see in journals or magazines are not subject to CCN. Neither are ads directed at healthcare providers. Additionally, TV and radio ads for veterinary prescription drugs are not required to comply with CCN. But to be clear, those ads still need to comply with their relevant regulations. They just don't need to be compliant with CCN. But we would note that voluntarily communicating the major statement in a CCN manner in these ads can enhance consumer comprehension and lead to better informed decisions regarding these drugs. So now you may be wondering when your ads need to be in compliance with CCN. The rule becomes effective on May 20, 2024, and all ads need to be in compliance with a clear, conspicuous, and neutral final rule on November 20, 2024. And of course, FDA recommends that firms ensure that their ads are brought into compliance as soon as possible. All right, so now that we know what types of ads that are subject to CCN, it's important to understand what in the ad must be clear, conspicuous, and neutral. What is a major statement? So the major statement is a term that refers to the major side effects and contraindications of a prescription drug. The major statement includes information about side effects, warnings, precautions, and contraindications, but it's not a listing of every risk. If you recall, I mentioned that promotional communications not in TV or radio format are required to have a brief summary of all necessary information related to side effects and contraindications, but DTC TV radio ads are able to present the major statement instead, which can be substantially shorter, so long as they include a way for consumers to obtain the full prescribing information elsewhere. We call this adequate provision. So it's important to note, and one thing I really want you to take away from this, is that CCN does not specify what side effects and contraindications are included in the major statement. It does not change that. What the final rule does is describe the standards for the manner of presentation, and what we think the manner of presentation is to be considered clear, conspicuous, and neutral. So first, we determined what ads need to be compliant with CCN, and second, we narrowed down what part of the ad needs to comply. So now we've gotten to the meat. So I am going to tick through, we're going to discuss the different standards, and I'm going to tick through these quickly, but we're going to actually, after going through this, slow down and go through each standard individually. As I previously noted, FDA required that we create these standards to determine whether the major statement is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. So over the next few slides, the standards are actually written as they are in the regulation. And again, we will go through these individually in a minute. So the major statement, first standard, major statement is presented in consumer-friendly language and terms that are readily understandable. Number two, the major statement's audio information in terms of the volume, articulation, and pacing is at least as understandable as the audio information presented in the rest of the advertisement. So standard three, in advertisements in television format, the major statement is presented concurrently using both audio and text, dual modality. To achieve dual modality, either the text displays the verbatim key terms or phrases from the corresponding audio, or the text displays the verbatim complete transcript of the corresponding audio. And the text is displayed for a sufficient duration to allow it to be read easily. For the purposes of this standard, the duration is considered sufficient if the text display begins at the same time and ends at approximately the same time as the corresponding audio. All right, standard four, in the advertisements in television format, for the text portion of the major statement, the size and style of font, the contrast with the background, and the placement on the screen allow the information to be read easily. And then finally, the fifth standard, during the presentation of the major statement, the advertisement does not include audio or visual elements, alone or in combination, that are likely to interfere with comprehension of the major statement. So I know that was a lot of dense information. So next we'll go through each of the standards a bit more in depth. All right, so standard 1 requires that the major statement is presented in consumer-friendly language and terminology that is readily understandable. That means firms should use terms that are directed towards consumers and limit medical and technical terms that are directed more towards healthcare providers. A major statement should also be devoid of vague language or terms that could be subject to different interpretations. For example, some means different things to different people. One thing that Standard 1 does not do is specify or require that the major statement be in a particular reading level. Standard 2 requires that the major statement's audio be as understandable as the audio in the rest of the ad in regards to the volume, articulation, and pacing. So, for example, to comply with Standard 2, firms may compare the volume, articulation, and pacing of the major statement and compare it to the rest of the audio in the rest of the ad and ensure that it's at least as understandable. Okay, so Standard 3. This is a dual modality requirement. It requires that in TV ads, the major statement is presented in audio and text concurrently. Since there are a couple of moving pieces in the standard, I've broken them apart for the next 2 standards. So importantly, remember that this standard is for TV ads. So the first prong is regarding what the text displays. To achieve dual modality, firms can use either the verbatim key terms and phrases from the corresponding audio, or use the entire verbatim transcript of the corresponding audio. So, for example, if the audio states the most common side effects of drug X are dry mouth, headache, and heartburn, the text may display that entire verbatim sentence, or it could display dry mouth, headache, heartburn. All right, and the second prong of dual modality is the duration of the text display. The rule states that the text duration is considered sufficient, is displayed for a sufficient time if to be read easily, that it needs to be read easily. And to achieve this, the text begins at the same time as the corresponding audio and ends at approximately the same time as the corresponding audio. Now, this should be considered from the time the audio begins. And firms should keep in mind that Standard 2 regarding the major statement's audio being as understandable as the audio in the rest of the ad still needs to be met while achieving dual modality. So just like Standard 3, Standard 4 applies only to ads in TV format. This standard states the text presentation of the major statement is easily readable in regards to the size and style of font, contrast with the background, and placement on the screen. Remember, the standard applies to the major statement presentation and not to the text in the rest of the ad. The standard does not require a specific size of font, etc., but what it does require is that the presentation of the text, when combined, is easily readable. And finally, we've reached Standard 5. So for a major statement to be considered clear, conspicuous, and neutral, Standard 5 states that the presentation does not include audio or visual elements, alone or in combination, that are likely to interfere with the major statement's comprehension. Again, this applies only during the major statement presentation, and this standard does not prohibit firms from, for example, having music play in the background during the major statement's presentation, nor does it prescribe the type of music that can be displayed during the major statement. But to be clear, conspicuous, and neutral, the music does not interfere with comprehension of the major statement. So one global thing of all the standards to keep in mind is that firms will need to analyze all of the standards on a case-by-case basis, mostly, to ensure that those standards and those ads comply with the rule. So now that we've gone through all 5 of the standards, you may be thinking to yourselves, do all of the standards apply to our ads to be considered clear, conspicuous, and neutral? So the answer is yes, if your ads are in television format. If you create a DTC human prescription drug ad in TV format that is subject to CCN, all 5 standards will be considered for determining clear, conspicuous, and neutral. If you, however, create a DTC human prescription drug ad in radio format that is subject to CCN, standards 1, 2, and 5 apply. And that is simply due to the visual elements that are in television rather than radio. All right, resources. So FDA does offer many resources. I'm only going to name a few in the next couple of slides, but I would like to remind everyone that you can go to the FDA webpage, the FDA.gov webpage, and search for guidance documents. There are many guidance documents available that could be helpful with creating prescription drug promotion and labeling. So I've talked with Jim. I've attached links in the presentation, and I believe he's going to send out a separate or attach different links there. But the first resource I'd like to discuss is a small entity compliance guide. This is probably your most useful resource, and we really recommend it. The small entity compliance guide was published to help small entities comply with the final rule. However, after reviewing it and completing it, we do believe that it's a great resource for all firms, not just small ones. As you can imagine, the regulation is written in very regulatory language and a lot of legalese. The small entity compliance guide is written in more plain language terms, and we think that is a very good resource and would highly recommend that for anyone looking and having questions. Another resource here is the OPDP webpage. We have a frequently asked questions section, and now that frequently asked questions section includes a section specific to the CCN final rule. So here's a resource that's not specific to CCN, and it's actually not new, but it is very, very helpful. In case anyone's not familiar, FDA has available reviewers to provide comments on proposed promotional communications. This is done by firms voluntarily upon request prior to disseminating the piece. Now, CDER has OPDP, CBER, the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. They have APLB, and those are the groups that actually review promotions for each center. OPDP and APLB do have different procedures, so I would highly recommend reviewing this guidance prior to submission, because you want to know who you're going to and what they require. So, and here we have a couple things, more generic. So CDER's OPDP and CBER's APLB are the ones, as I said, that review advertising and promotional labeling. So OPDP reviews promotion of prescription drugs. So OPDP's main page, where you can find resources, news, and frequently asked questions regarding promotion of prescription drugs, is helpful. And then APLB regulates promotion of licensed biological products, including vaccines, allergenic extracts, blood products, and gene therapy products. And the APLB page has resources specific to biologic advertising and promotion. Okay, to summarize what you've heard, the clear, conspicuous, and neutral final rule is 21 CFR 202.1E1. And the final rule requires that in certain human prescription drugs presented directly to consumers in TV or radio format, the major side effects and contraindications must be presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. Ads that are subject to the clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner rule must be in compliance by November 20, 2024. And then if you have any questions on your ads, please reach out to the reviewers. They're happy to provide comments on your ads before you disseminate them. So I'd like to thank you for hosting me today. I hope I was able to provide some helpful information regarding prescription drug promotion and the CCN final rule. And let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Really do appreciate your time and the depth you went into on the CCN rule. We're going to take some questions with the time remaining, so we got adequate time. So please, if you have any questions, we have a couple already, please type them into the Q&A section. Also, as noted, the FDA resources that were presented in her presentation will be available on the website recording landing page. So we'll have that up in a couple of days, and we'll try to reach back out to everyone who registered to this event to let you know that the recording is available, so you can pass it on to others to watch on demand, and the resources that Susanna mentioned. So the first question that comes to mind is, why is there a separate effective and compliance date with this rule?
Yeah, thank you. So, of course, affected firms are encouraged to comply as soon as possible after the effective date. But we recognize that this rule impacts existing ads in production, and distribution agreements. So the FDA believes that providing an effective date of May 20, 2024, and a compliance date of November 20, 2024, enables firms to bring all ads into compliance that are subject to the rule, regardless of where those ads may be in their life cycle.
Okay, so this is a great time to submit these ads or pre-existing ads that you've had, have them comply with as best they can with the rule, and then be submitted. Is there a difference now in how FDA has to respond, or do they respond to every submission after May 20th, or how does it work?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but what I believe you're asking is, would we always respond or provide comments? We do provide comments to firms that request comments. Now, and I am definitely not the person to answer this part of it because it's not in my little purview. But there are different requirements for timelines, whether it's a new drug that's going for launch, things like that. So I'm not able to give you those timelines and timings, but that's something, firms can reach out to the reviewers and discuss with them.
Terrific. This is a question that was asked, and I'll reformat it a little bit differently. In addition to linear television and radio, direct-to-consumer ads are being presented in a broad range of devices and are being disseminated via even broader platforms such as social media and connected TV. How does the rule adapt for those different platforms, or are you planning, as the FDA, planning to adapt the rules for those platforms?
So, FDA acknowledges that evolving technologies have allowed for DTC, TV, radio ads to be presented on a broader range of devices, and they're disseminated via a broader range of platforms since the issuance of the proposed rule. However, the fundamental attributes of communication that impact the likelihood that audiences will notice, attend to, and comprehend information do not turn on the delivery technology. Now, FDA conducted an informal review of ads from firms that submitted ads, and we observed that firms have not developed distinct ads for dissemination on new devices and platforms, and that DTC, TV, radio ads remain essentially the same.
Yeah, I think that's important. Here's a different wrinkle that I know Susanna can't comment on. But a few weeks ago, there were two senators who urged the FDA to expand their CCN rule to all digital platforms where prescription drug advertisements occurred. Now, as a lawyer, you may say, well, technically, you're not violating the rule because that really only applied to the linear TV and radio formats. And you would be absolutely right. But what I will tell you in talking with both those offices is I think you run the rule of damage to your brand if you run the assumption that you shouldn't be complying or don't have to comply on other platforms necessarily with the CCN rule. Here's why, because I think they will use you as poster children of bad behavior. So if you pick up nothing else from this, it's not that the FDA will come after you, but I think you could be showcased, or your brands could be showcased as essentially not behaving well. And that will lead them to, probably introduce some legislation formally if the FDA doesn't move. So take that as a suggestion. It's not legal advice, but I would recommend that you think about applying the CCN rule to all platforms where you have prescription drug advertising. That's just a little bit of background and a little bit knowing what we know about the politics that are going on and likely to occur as this rule is implemented and enforced over the next year. So let me ask another question that appeared. Does FDA, as it applies to the CCN rule, apply specific, let me try that again. What is the exact definition of format? Is it used on screen size or content or device, or maybe even why didn't the FDA include any kind of requirements for like grade level reading or colors or sizes or text fonts or things like that?
So I can definitely address a couple of those kind of individually. So as far as the grade level reading requirement, during our rulemaking, we actually did receive comments regarding particular grade levels. However, as we noted in the preamble, we understand that it may be necessary to include certain terms. In the preamble, we use the disease state tuberculosis. And if that's used in the major statement, it could result in a relatively high grade level rating. So as far as the reading level, that was our rationale for not including a particular reading level. Now, as far as like the text, the color sizes, the font, and text for the major statement, again, we considered comments, and we concluded that there's more than one way to present the text information that will allow the text to be read easily. We understand that different presentational elements may interact and must be considered together with more than one combination allowing for the text to be read easily. And as I stated in the presentation, and it absolutely is important, each of these standards needs to be reviewed by the firm, and really kind of, they need to review them and see whether they've met that standard.
Thank you.
I think there was more to it, but I don't think I can go into that.
No, I think that's I think you did a great job. Thank you. Here's a comment and a little bit of a question. He says, I'm hearing that there is a move to 90 seconds for TV ads for pharma to be able to explain pharma side effects better to consumers. Is that true?
So that would be something that would be up to the individual firms, really. Do we think that the rule will require or necessarily cause TV ads to be longer? And our answer to that would be no. I mean, for dual modality, the rule doesn't require the entire verbatim transcript of the audio portion of the major statement to be presented on the screen. Instead, we provided flexibility and give the option that the verbatim keywords and phrases from the audio be used instead. In addition, the duration of the display of the text is considered sufficient if it begins at the same time and ends at approximately the same time as the corresponding audio. Now, to kind of move along with that is the idea of fair balance. So the law requires that a product provide a fair balance of information about the drug's risk compared to its benefits. So that means the content and presentation of a drug's most important risk must be reasonably similar to the content and presentation of its benefits. That doesn't mean that equal time and space must be given to risks and benefits in ads in TV or radio format, but the amount of time or space needed to present risk information will depend on the drug's risk and the way that both the benefit and risk information is presented.
Right. Yeah. I
So
think
that's
it's
long story short.
yeah. I think it's clear that the CCN rule will add to length of ad to make sure that the information is presented in a clear, conspicuous manner. Before, what you saw in many ads is a lot of these contraindications or were sped read into these. And I think the days of speed reading, because that is not either clear or conspicuous and it's hard to understand. So it has to be done in a manner, as I understand the rule, that essentially the average person could reasonably understand when taking in the ad. So another question here is, if my ad is not compliant by the deadline, what is the consequence? Is there a fine? And how will the FDA monitor this?
So I can touch on it a little bit. So as I mentioned, we have pharmacist reviewers, and our reviewers actually have their specialty area of products, and they review and surveil and all the stuff with the products. So, you know, will they look and see if ads are compliant? Absolutely, they do that on a daily basis. Now, as far as November 21st, 2024, when the rule, the compliance date of the rule hits, you know, that would be a possibility that FDA might, you know, send out a letter. But that's all hypotheticals. We don't, you know, as you mentioned, we don't deal on hypotheticals. And as far as what type of consequence it would be, that again is a hypothetical. It really depends on the ad and different things such as the amount of risk and things like that.
Listen, I'm going to try to wrap it up there. And here's some contact information from the 4A's government relations team. If you have any more questions. Again, Susanna, thank you very, very much for your time and your willingness to come on and talk a little bit more about the CCN rule. We very much appreciate it. And thank you for, you're most welcome. And thank you for attending today. Take care, all.